After the US won World War II with the Allied powers in 1945, the economy had a boom like no other. With many veterans of the war being given money to pursue a college education and consumerism on another rise, the economy experienced a surge like never before. However, like with most things in the United States at this time, Americans who were black were excluded due to bigotry, prejudices, and many other forms of racism. And due to this new booming economy increasing the gap between the rich and the poor even more than the decades before, people who center on these prejudices, which also includes Americans who are women, Hispanic, or African as well, were more aggressive to get their civil rights and freedom than ever before. One person who fought for civil rights was Malcolm X, and today we'll cover the impact he had on his cause. Malcolm X was born in 1925 and was formerly known as Malcolm Little. The Little family's experience with racism had Malcolm face consequences as such before he was even able to speak properly. In 1928, the Little family moved to Lansing, Michigan, and was simultaneously sued and evicted for purchasing a Caucasian-only house. And this said house was burnt down days after. It is very likely, and as Malcolm believes, that this was the cause of a white supremacist group, though the lack of a proper police report makes this hard to prove for certain. In 1931, Earl Little, or Malcolm's dad, is killed in what the police call a streetcar accident, which Malcolm also believes was the doing of a white supremacist group. Shortly after, Lewis Little, or Malcolm's mom, is then put into a mental asylum for 26 years. All the Little children are then placed in foster homes, which mostly had white children. Malcolm performed really well in the school there, well, he wished to be a lawyer. His teachers heavily insist that I became a carpenter instead. Malcolm ends up working many jobs after graduating from the school, such as in a jewelry store and on railroads. He also learned how to dress like a hipster.
When the pimp's in the crib, ma, drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot.
However, in 1943, 2 years before World War II was ended, Malcolm X was drafted to join the army, resisting by refusing to show up and claimed he wanted to fight for the Japanese instead and kill all whites. As such, he ended up in jail for 4 months and was given 1 year of probation. And from 1945 to 1946, Malcolm X would have entered a large crime spree in the center of Boston, largely involving stealing jewelry and other precious items that only rich people would own. However, in one of his heists, he ended up being caught with Malcolm Jarvis, Sophia, and two other white women. Malcolm Jarvis, Malcolm X, and Sophia, which is Malcolm X's girlfriend, are the only ones to face any consequences for this heist. Sophia was given 7 months in jail, and there is an 8 year sentence given to both Malcolms. The police have also attempted to convince Sophia to convict him of rape to increase the sentence even further. However, she strongly refused. Malcolm X was to be released in 1952. However, during his time in jail, him and his siblings have largely converted to the Nation of Islam while inside. The Nation of Islam, which has very little to do with Islam, is a religion based on the belief that Christianity is the white man's religion made to corrupt the message of Islam and support white supremacy. Members would have believed that white people were created by a rogue scientist named Yaqub, who bleached black people in order to make a race of white, blue-eyed devils. Okay, so anyways, both Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam, would speak across the United States while preaching the words of the Nation of Islam, having membership soar across America very quickly. Malcolm X ends up traveling the entirety of the United States in order to speak the words of the Nation of Islam. For as he states, for Mr. Muhammad's teachings really to resurrect American black people, Islam obviously had to grow very big. And nowhere in America is such a single temple potential available as in New York's five boroughs. However, this would eventually become much more difficult for Malcolm. On April 4th of 1957, a member of the New York Temple, Johnson Hinton, was beaten up by the police. Malcolm X had to immediately demand the man receive medical attention, as the color of his skin made him not immediately receive shots from the get-go. Malcolm X then successfully sues the New York City for police brutality. However, this makes the FBI, who has been harassing and profiling him since 1953, watch over and stalk him even further. Over the course of several more years afterwards, Malcolm X continues traveling across the United States while still preaching the Nation of Islam's words. He quickly, however, stopped preaching Nation of Islam's words and moved to a different viewpoint of instead of just black supremacy, equal rights for all. He
With
showed
no
this
badge
rise
or
of
no
black
white
racism in
skin
his
or no white
documentary
sheep
titled The Hate
or
That
no
Hate
white
Produced that he has
anything
published on
else.
July 13th,
The
1959.
police
This
just came here,
documentary has helped Malcolm X
they
gain a
put their
broad
club
increase in
upside
radio
your
and
head,
television presence, helping
and then turn
solidify
around
himself as
and
civil rights
accuse
leader.
you of
Malcolm X,
attacking
however,
them.
would quickly throw this fame away. When the March of Washington occurred in April 1963 to honor JFK after his assassination, Malcolm X states a claim that it was run by whites in front of a statue of a president who has been dead for 100 years and who did not like us when he was alive. For this and calling out his charges of adultery, Elijah Badahad would have effectively kicked Malcolm X out of the Nation of Islam. He would then go to create his own organization titled the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. He would expand his pull on civil rights much further from here, even being Martin Luther King Jr. the month he created the organization. This would be the only time they met, and his reach on civil rights would very quickly be stopped from here. On February 21st, 1965, a man ran at Malcolm X with a sawed-off shotgun and fired. Two other men then quickly came right behind him with handguns and continuing fired at Malcolm X. He was pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. and 21 gunshots were identified, 10 coming from the shotgun. One of the suspects, Talmadge Hayard, was beaten by the crowd as the police arrived, and while Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson were convicted of murder for life, both were let on parole and released in 2021, as police claim now there was not enough evidence to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. With many people, including Martin Luther King Jr., agreeing Malcolm X was an important keystone in the civil rights movement, both their assassinations, along with the assassinations of many other people important to the civil rights movement, severely delayed and disorganized the movement's efforts. It is likely freedom for black people would have come much sooner with these leaders still alive.